Watching the days go by, I got you on my mind. Yeah, I need you by my side, but it's gonna take some time.
Hi, thank you for watching The Main Ingredient. I'm Bethany Morse. I'm filling in for Pastor Michael today, and we're talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'm here with one of my really good friends, Silvio, and we're kind of just talking about what he's doing in the community and just how we are able to celebrate culture. So Silvio, just talk a little about yourself. You're from Guatemala.
Yeah, I am from Guatemala most of the time. Depends who asks, though. No, I'm 100% from Guatemala. Was born and raised in Guatemala City, Guatemala.
Yeah.
Largest city in Central America, and was there till I was 18. And then went to Cornerstone University right here, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and was there for 4 years. And now here, part of the community, have a job locally in the area in Wyoming, and love it. Yeah, it's been a good time.
So what drew you to Grand Rapids, Michigan? It's kind of random, right? You know, you come from Guatemala City, what brought you to school here? What did you study?
Yeah. So I'd say it's like a sort of a series of miracles for sure. I was planning on staying in a business school in Guatemala City and just doing school there. But then after my friends, Josh and Joel, came to visit a few summers in a row, they said, hey, you should really check out Cornerstone. So I said, okay, check it out. Checked it out. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of doors opened, like 8 doors in a row. And it just made it super clear that this was a good opportunity for me. And the biggest thing that really was a draw for me was the fact that Cornerstone seemed like it was a community where they wanted people to be trained and equipped to go be the lights wherever they're at, wherever in the world that is. So I got the opportunity to do that now as an international business and marketing major.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a mouthful. Yeah. But I got to, in the business field where I'm at now, still share the good news of Jesus, share the good news of what he's done in my life, and share that with everybody I get to meet on a daily basis.
And I think that's such a good perspective because your parents are in the ministry, they're pastors, and your grandparents are in the ministry and are pastors. So that is that generational pastorship. Did you feel like through your life that's kind of what you were trained for? What was it hard for you to break off into the business realm of things?
Yeah. I definitely felt like my life was all pointing towards ministry as far as what I wanted to do vocationally. And for a long time, I definitely thought like that. Even I know I've told you a couple times before, but between my sophomore and junior year of high school, I was like, all right, that's it. I said, Dad, that's it. I'm going to get in the Word. I'm dropping out of high school. I'm going to go full-time ministry because Jesus is coming soon.
Right.
So I had that passion, definitely that desire to get into ministry, but definitely wanted to also follow a path that seemed like would make sense. So that's when I decided to go into business. And it was definitely a challenge for me personally, growing up my whole life thinking I'd be going into full-time ministry right after college. And then all of a sudden going into business. It was definitely a shift for me, but I think a really good one. And I feel like I'm still doing full-time ministry now at my job. Still doing full-time ministry, even though I'm not working for a church or for a ministry per se.
And so when we think about that, I think a lot of times you bring up a really good point. People think full-time ministry, you have to be in the 4 walls of a church.
Yeah.
So for those that are thinking, I want to be in ministry, but I don't feel called to be a pastor or be working in a church, how would you tell them they can be a light in where they're at?
Yeah. Well, that's a question I guess I wrestle with on a daily basis because I know I have I don't know, the word kind of sounds weird, but the temptation to go work in full-time ministry, or at least the desire to go work in full-time ministry, even on a weekly basis. But I would say pretty much just being faithful where you're at, just being a really, really good worker. Wherever I'm at, I want to be really, really good, and that's testimony in itself. It's a testimony to who God is, to who I believe in, a God of excellence, a God of perseverance, of patience. So I guess first of all, just being really, really faithful where I'm at. And second of all, every day I have the opportunity to interact with people, whether that is a family that comes into my office that I get to help out, or whether it is my coworkers, and just with them sharing the light of Jesus, not only literally by telling them about the gospel, sharing the gospel, but also offering a prayer for them, asking how they're doing, building that relationship. And out of that place of relationship, then I have a platform to share the love of Jesus. But it doesn't come without that relationship, without the intentionality of building that up. So I would say wherever you're at, whether you are working at a church, whether you are working in an office in the secular world, you have the opportunity to impact people, and you have a platform. That's what I would tell them. You have a platform, and just use that to ask questions, be intentional with people, share the love of Jesus, ask how you can pray for them. And yeah, those are just a few of the ways, but there's so many more. Yeah.
Because you're working in insurance, right?
I am. Yeah.
That's great. And I think that's such a good word. I think about, knowing that you don't always have the opportunity to speak freely about your faith in that kind of work environment, whether, if you're working in school, for instance, a lot of times you're not able to talk about your faith.
Yeah.
So being able to show that through your actions and through your words and when you treat other people, that's really cool, a really cool concept to think about. And so just kind of thinking about that, because you also do other things outside of work.
Yeah.
So I just want to kind of give you some room to talk about that. You're in different ministries, different opportunities that you've sought out, that you've created. So just what are you doing outside of work? Yeah,
so I say I work at my job from 9 to 5, but then after that, I'm in full-time ministry. That's what I like to think. So with a group of friends over this past summer, we started a community of people that just got together and prayed and sought out what the Lord wanted us to do for that week. And most of the weeks, it was a Monday night and a Friday night that we would just go out and did outreach. So what that looked like was either we did a worship night at a local park, or we would go out and seek people to pray for, and just pray, asking Lord, would you highlight some people who you want us to go and pray for? And a lot of times it was just super cool to see how very specifically we've been praying for somebody or asking to pray for somebody, and then we would go and see that person, go find that person, whether that is by their name or by specific shirt they were wearing, things like that. But literally just being intentional and saying, Lord, we want to partner with what you're doing with your kingdom right here in the area, right here in Grand Rapids and Wyoming and Holland. We went to all sorts of different places, but literally saw that come to fruition because of prayer. And it all started out of that. It was all birthed out of prayer, saying, Lord, where do you want us to go? What do you want us to do? So that was one of the things I was involved with during the summer.
Wow.
Now I'm also part of a ministry called Met by Love. We do worship nights every Monday night, and then there's also different events that happen like once a month. But I get to help lead worship at one of the campuses there. Cool. And it's a good time. Yeah, it's a good time.
That's awesome. And your family is pretty active. You help them through Guatemala from Michigan. So how do you do that too?
Yeah, for sure. So my family in Guatemala has churches that they help out, or that they. My dad pastors a church, and then there's also connected to a network of different churches that are in Guatemala. And one of the things that I've been doing recently is helping to build funds for those churches, because a lot of them were struggling with like COVID, a lot of people leaving, finances being cut, government regulations, different things like that. But really just kind of putting the word out there, partnering with local churches that I know here, asking if there's any way that we can partner with them. I know we're starting some mission trip ideas coming down here for the next year. Mission trip ideas, but just building funds, building relationships, and building a network where pastors can be there to support each other. Because full-time ministry can be kind of lonely. And I do know quite a bit of families that are in full-time ministry, so just connecting them to each other and having that support network is super important. So have been doing that a little bit as well.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. I was even thinking about that generational ministry and how your parents probably were praying for you as, you weren't even born yet, and your grandparents were praying for your parents. Yeah. And this reminds me of this. There's this passage in Hebrews, and it talks about how Hebrews 7, it talks about Abraham paid a tithe. And if you don't know what a tithe is, it's giving back your blessings to the church and to the Lord, what he's given to you. And so Abraham paid a tithe to Melchizedek. Hard word to say. Try to say that 10 times fast. I can barely say it once. Melchizedek. He was a high priest at the time, and he was just known as this amazing high priest. And Abraham had paid him a tithe. And therefore, his descendants had already paid him a tithe as well, because of the paying it forward aspect. And I just think that's a lot right there to sit with.
Yeah.
The idea of paying it forward for your descendants and the ancestors that have paid it forward for you. And I think I just want to sit with that and talk about that with you a little bit. You know, when I think of paying it forward, I think of going through the drive-through. And, you know, like when somebody pays for your meal and it's like the best thing ever, you're like, whoa. But then what do I do with that money and that gift that I have now? Do I pocket it and just keep it for myself later? Or do I pay for the car behind me?
Yeah.
And obviously you can't pay for everyone because, you know, we don't have all the resources we maybe desire. But how do I take the blessing that I have received and give it to people behind me and just watch that trickle effect and how that would change things? So when thinking about that in ministry too, you know, not just monetary ways, but how do we do that in the way that we pray for our descendants? So have you seen in your life, this might be a big question, but have you seen in your life areas that you've been able to reap from other people's sowing?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's definitely, I think not only my story, but everybody's story. We truly reap the benefits of what somebody else sowed. Somebody else sowed time discipling me, praying for me. And the same thing with my parents. Somebody else sowed time discipling them, praying for them, teaching them, so that when I was born, I grew up in a church, but also in a home where I was so loved, so cared for, so discipled, so in love with the Bible, in love with church, even in love with just going and doing the practices that Jesus asked us to do with prayer. But that's definitely somebody spent that time. So somebody spent that time with my parents. And then my parents spent that time with me, teaching me to follow Jesus, teaching me to have a relationship with him most of all. And then I also see that as far as like my grandparents spending time with me and praying for me. I know they were praying for me for decades before I was even born, before I was even a thought in anybody's mind. Truly seeing the effect on that and how their prayers even today have impacted my life. I even see like my grandma. I love my grandma. She's awesome. She calls me still and she prays with me. She says, "Hey, can we like take a minute and pray?" Just that. I know that she doesn't only pray for me for that minute that we're on the phone or a couple minutes that we're on the phone, but she spends time intentionally praying for me, asking for the Lord's will for my life. And then I've seen truly doors open because of that, because of what the time and effort that they've put into ministry, the time and effort that they've put into building relationships with others in ministry. I've seen that open up opportunities for me in ministry as well. Some of the opportunities I have now is because of the relationships that they've built, because they've paid it forward, because they've spent that time, because they've built those relationships, because they've, tithed for me, if you could say it, like Abraham was tithing for Melchizedek ahead of time. So the actions that we take today, what we build today, the roots that we set in today aren't only for ourselves, but they're also for our future generations. And I've seen that with my grandparents, with my parents, on both sides, like my grandparents, and then my parents. And then also I believe that the actions I'm taking now will be for the future of my children and then their children. And it's truly been a blessing to be part of a family that's truly sowed for me, paid it forward for me, and had the blessing of that. And then also just thought here, like thinking of what Jesus did for us. Like he paid it forward for us, like on the cross, like he gave his life for us. He already paid it forward so that we could have a relationship with the Father. So just even in that, I mean, you might not come from a family where that's the case, but even so, Jesus already paid it forward for you. He already opened the way for you to come to the Father. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. And nobody comes to the Father except through him. So regardless of what my family would have done or could have done to pay it forward for me, it's all through Jesus and it's all for Jesus. So he's the one who opened the way. He's the one who can do that for you, for everybody, for all of us. So he paid it forward for us.
No, that's great. Wow, there's so much to unpack there. It's so great. I think, and that's such a good mindset, I think, to think that our actions don't just, impact us, but can impact the generations that follow. How can you be a light to others? Like if you're on the bus, to even think about the people that are going to sit in the seat after you, you know? I think it's just this complete mind shift. I just think that's so great. And wow, I love that. So you kind of touched on before how your parents and grandparents had sown these different things into you that you were able to reap. So thinking forward with that kind of mindset, how are you doing things today that future generations will be able to reap from you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I can start with a little quote I heard from my grandpa. He tells a story with it. I'll keep the story super brief so I can, so just for time's sake.
Sure,
yeah,
for time's sake.
Just for time's sake. But he says that life turns around. Life goes in cycles. So he said in Spanish, he says, La vida da vueltas. So life turns around and goes in cycles. He tells a story of when he was a young boy in a little village in Guatemala. He had a couple friends that he wanted to take to the circus. The circus was in town.
Okay.
But he only had enough money to invite himself and to invite one of his friends. So he gets to the booth and he's about to buy his tickets. And he has to pick between one of his two friends. And then the circus owner comes out and says, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. Don't have to pay any money for it. The three of you guys can come in. And actually, you won't be towards the back. You'll be in the front row. So this happens when he was a little boy.
Yeah.
And he says life goes on, lives his life. And eventually, after decades pass, he is now the general manager of a hospital in Guatemala City.
Okay.
So everything changed, right?
Sure.
It's a big, big gap.
I thought you were going to say the circus. But
well, no, not the circus.
That's good.
It turns out he's the manager of a hospital in Guatemala City, like the best hospital in the city and whatever back in the day. And turns out that he sees a really, really large bill come in for a couple people from the circus, and he says, "Okay, cool. Let me look at what's going on here." Turns out it's the same man who managed the circus.
Wow.
It had a really, really large bill to pay because two of the people who I forgot the word. Yes, those people. Yeah, the trapeze people. Had gotten hurt, and then this guy who used to own the circus, or who owned the circus at the time, had no money to pay for it. So that those 10 cents that manager, that circus owner had sowed decades before, later came back, and eventually my grandpa was able to help him out. I can't remember if he paid for the whole bill or something happened, but it turns out that he sowed, that the circus owner sowed in a little kid decades ago, later on came back and was a blessing to him. And so I want to make sure I'm doing the same thing. I have the same story with my dad. My grandpa on my dad's side had sown a blessing to somebody, and then decades later my dad came back and was trying to do business with them, and turns out because of that relationship that my grandpa had built years and years before that, it came back to be a blessing to my dad as well. So I want to make sure I'm doing that as well, and the relationships that I build and the way I treat others, and even, this is a funny one, but even the tips I give at a restaurant, you know. I want to make sure that I'm building a good foundation for my kids and their kids. More practically, how I would say relationships, make sure you're truly loving people. Like, it's literally just following Jesus. He said, love God with everything you got and love your neighbor as yourself. So treat others as you would like to be treated. Golden rule, right? I think more practically that looks like maybe leaving a larger tip than you expected. Saying, oh, if I was in their position, this is how I would want to be treated, and doing that. I think those are a few examples. Maybe you have some more.
I think it is hard too, right? Because I think when we don't have the money to do it, like what can I do? But even if you see someone on the street and they're struggling with a bag, and how many times do we turn a blind eye and like, well, that's kind of weird. They might think I'm weird.
Yeah.
They could say no, but they could say yes, and you could be a huge blessing to their day. I think some of the best parts of my day are when a random stranger just says, hey, I love your outfit. Yeah. Like, why does that mean the world to me? But it does, because somebody took the time to acknowledge me and see me. And I think that's the biggest thing you can do for people, especially in these days. Like, I see you, you're valued. You know, if it's your outfit, if it's just
a smile.
The smile. Yeah. Or you go to some restaurant and you say, how's your day going? Sometimes their day is not going great. I've seen people how they treat people in restaurants or, in stores. And that might be the only time somebody asks them that day. Yeah. And I think when we really think about, I might be the only Jesus they see today, it completely changes your outlook on life. Yeah.
And I know you mentioned earlier, you were talking about, in the school setting, right? You don't know what, if I don't know if there's any teachers watching this or if you work at a school at all, but you don't know what the family situation is like. You don't know if the parents are struggling. You don't know what's going on. And if you can share that love, if you can make sure the other person feels loved, cared for, seen, that can be a huge testimony
Yes.
To who God is. And then maybe in 10, 20 years on the road, they'll meet you again, or they'll meet one of your kids, or they'll hear, or even hear somebody you know. I heard this pastor say how like so many times we like name drop. We're like, oh yeah, I know Bethany, right? That we like name drop in conversation just with others. Oh, I know Bethany. Yeah, she's my friend.
Sure.
But like even just that, even just having somebody in common can open up a door for somebody else that you don't even know about. So where you're sowing is, it's not sowing just for yourself, not sowing just for your generations, but I think maybe for your friends, even for your local church family. Like I know you mentioned the church you go to, and I'm like, oh man, I heard so many good things about that church, and mainly from you. And now I'm like, I meet people in like a different friend groups, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love that church. Why? Because I've heard good about that. And I feel like we can start sowing, paying it forward for others, just even in our community. Or just think about it in like a broader sense, the kingdom sense. Like, oh, I used to know somebody who was a Christian when I was a little boy. They treated me so well. Or and then later on, maybe they get to meet somebody and they get to be a witness, and receive the gospel because of all the little seeds that we're planting. One of the things I heard one of my friends say was how a lot of times we get to plant little seeds, and eventually somebody will receive the gospel, will receive Jesus, and it's all because of a bunch of little seeds that were planted. It's not necessarily all in one day. It's not. You don't necessarily get from A to Z all the way in one day. Maybe you get from A to B, or A to C, or A to D in one day, and then eventually it'll all pay out, and it'll all be paying it forward also for that person's eternity. So just thinking of that, I know it's just a thought that popped in my mind, but it's just literally paying it forward. Looks like all that. Looks like smiling. Looks like asking how their day goes. Looks like maybe giving a little tip, a larger tip. But all those things are all kind of play a part. Yeah.
No, and that's great. And I was just thinking too, I think that's an important thing to say, that you might not see the reaping of what you sowed your whole lifetime on earth, right?
Yeah.
But you have no idea how your impact was on somebody that they'll tell their kids about. And they'll tell their kids about. And I think something we had talked about earlier about how you have this beautiful generational ministry in your life, but how you said not everyone has that. And something I thought about was you could be the start of a generation.
Wow, that's good.
And, depending on how you sow in others, that could change a whole generation line.
That's true.
And I think that's not because of something great we did or who we are, but of who lives in us and how we have shown his faithfulness and goodness. And, to wear the title of a Christian, a little Christian, is something that we take lightly, but we should take seriously. And I think it's so cool to just hear about how you're doing that in your life, and coming from Guatemala, which probably was different in ministry-wise, and having to adapt in different culture, and how to make people feel seen in a place that you might not even feel seen, right?
Right, yeah.
It's great. I just thank you so much for just talking about this and dealing with this. Anything else you want to just
that's definitely the case for my family. It was my great great aunt who first heard the message of Jesus, and then she sowed it in my grandpa, and now out of that generation, it spread throughout my whole family. So yeah, that's absolutely right. We don't know what this could begin. We don't know what our choosing to follow Jesus could do for the rest of our generations, and for so many others, for a whole community even. And I know that's the case for my family, just being blessed by that, and I know that can be the case for your family, and for your family, and for all the I believe that can be the case for everybody. So truly believing that just one simple action today can have that eternal impact. So definitely want to just encourage you in that one simple action today can pay it forward for somebody else, can have that eternal impact. So go for it. Get after it. Be bold. Step into that action. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching The Main Ingredient. We just appreciate just going forward and thinking about how we can pay it forward for those around us, and how we can make an internal impact, like you said. Thanks for watching. Thank you again for watching The Main Ingredient. Stick around, because we have a very special musical performance by Yaremi Mora Garcia, accompanied by Alyssa Long John, performing Estar Contigo, and you do not want to miss it. For more information about The Main Ingredient, you can go to yourmainingredient.com or follow us on social media to stay updated with all the content we're putting out and how we can just be in community with you. All of the links are going to be in the description, so you can just click on there and like and follow. Let's turn it over to Amy and Alyssa. Thanks again.
Me has quebrantado una y otra vez, me siento olvidado, como si no me ves. Y cuando te hablo, lo único que puedo hacer es esperar. Me has sostenido una y otra vez, creer que conmigo sigues siendo fiel, es por tu palabra que no me rendiré, yo confiaré. Estar contigo, no hay otro lugar que me llene. En la tempestad me das calma, nada detendrá tu fidelidad. Mi alma restauras una y otra vez, tu amor me rodea, siempre tú eres fiel. Y cuando te hablo, escuchas mi clamor, en ti puedo confiar. Me has sostenido una y otra vez, creer que conmigo siempre tú eres fiel. Y cuando te hablo, escuchas mi clamor, en ti puedo confiar. Estar contigo, no hay otro lugar que me llene. En la tempestad me das calma, nada detendrá tu fidelidad. Oh, estar contigo, no hay otro lugar que me llene. En la tempestad me das calma, nada detendrá tu fidelidad. Oh, 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 oh. Estar contigo, no hay otro lugar que me llene. En la tempestad me das calma, nada detendrá tu fidelidad. Oh, estar contigo, no hay otro lugar que me llene. En la tempestad me das calma, nada detendrá tu fidelidad.